Now I would like to introduce the speaker, our today's speaker, and that is Ijo Fan. He's an assistant professor in the Graduate School of Education at Peking University and an adjunct research fellow at the Center for Learning Analytics at Monash University. He identifies as a learning analyst, employing computational techniques to enhance the understanding of self-regulated learning and to develop next-generation learning environments for envisioning future education. His most recent research focuses on human-AI collaboration and the scaffolding of hybrid intelligence. In 2023, he received the Emerging Scholar Award from SoLAR, as well as the Early Career Researcher Grant to further his research in this area. Today, he will present his recently concluded project that was funded through the SoLAR Early Career Researcher Grant, which centers on understanding learners' interactions and regulation using ChatGPT. In this talk, Ijo will also discuss the promises and challenges of using generative AI in education that he identified during his studies. So thank you for being here, Ijo, and sharing your research with us. The floor is yours.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Aina, for this kind introduction, and also thank you, and Roger, for organizing this webinar. This is really exciting, and I have been looking forward to this section for quite a long time because I did a quick, short presentation during LAC this year in Japan. It's like about 15 minutes, and it was really short. So I was rushing to cover all some of my results and discussion points. And after that, Iona came to me and said, "Oh, we have we can organize a webinar, give me like a longer time, maybe 40, 50 minutes. So I'm really happy that I can share our research. So this study is as Iona introduced, funded by SoLAR ECR grant. So it is not a huge, big grant, but it is a very good starting point, and helped me to start working on this topic. And also I used the startup package at Peking University, worked on this project. So today I will introduce our research. So I want to quickly mention where I started. Last year, February last year, I left Edinburgh and went back to Peking University to start as assistant professor. At March, SoLAR shared this call for proposals titled as Enhancing Learning with Learning Analytics in an AI-Powered World. And almost at the same time, so ChatGPT-4 was announced and published. And at that, back like a year ago, lots of challenges and potentials were discussed. But there are also lots of unknowns. So we are all very excited, but barely no empirical studies informed us what actually happened and what really works and what not work. So my motivation is to continue my postdoc project, which is called Flora. So if you're interested, feel free to search this project. So this project was targeting on self-regulation. And in the age of AI, then this topic kind of slowly moves to hybrid human AI regulation or human AI collaboration. So then I write this very exploratory and experimental study proposal, and was luckily get accepted. So that's what got me here today. And I would like to share that even though in this experimental study, we designed a randomized study to compare ChatGPT and human expert and also other tools, but I think that's not really our main aim of this study. Our main aim is to understand or better understand the relationships between AI and human. So I will unpack this a little bit more. So since we most of our audience are already familiar with ChatGPT, I'm sure, and interested in learning analytics, then I won't do lots of literature review or background introduction. I will jump directly into our experimental design. So at Peking University, we recruit more than 130 participants to join our study. So this is a reading and writing task topic at AI education. So students were required to read and write on AI education and write an essay to describe future education in 2035. And this study was separate, designed into different stages. So in the pre-test, they do some questionnaires, knowledge tests, and motivation questionnaires. Then we give them a quick training video showing the learning environment, the task, and also some suggestions. Then they do these 2 hours reading, writing. They are Chinese students, so they are doing it in English. They're not their first language, so it took quite long. And we do provide reading material, rubric of how to write the essay. So after this stage, students have a version of their essay, and then they enter another short training to introduce different learning facilitators. At this time, they were randomized into 4 groups. The control group, they basically finished the revision of the essay by themselves. The AI group, they interact with ChatGPT within the learning environment. And then we have a HE group, is a human expert group. We invited a very experienced teacher to help us conduct this study. Then we also have a checklist group. We designed a learning analytics tool to help students to check their writing. So after another hour of revising, they have a version of essay 2. Then they enter the post-task test surveys, and also within a day, we do an interview with students. So this 1 hour is where we do the intervention. So this is our learning environment. It's a model-based learning environment, but we designed several tools. For example, this essay writing box, annotation tools, planner tools, and timer tools. So in the second hour, in the second stage, in the revision stage, different students have different conditions. Like this AI group, they have a chat box. They can chat directly with ChatGPT API. So the HE group, we invited a teacher who was teaching academic writing at our university and was very experienced in this topic. And this task was also used in his class for more than 3 years. And we also designed this checklist tool to check, for example, basic writing grammar mistakes, academic writing rules, originality of the essay, and their writing levels. For example, that's a simple remember or summarizing what is written in the reading material, or this is showing their understanding, or this is showing their application of certain knowledge or creation based on the Bloom's taxonomy. So in the lab setting, we did the study 1 by 1. So we invite every participant to come to our lab, and we collect multi-channel data. For example, this test data, the survey data, learning trace data, any interactions within this learning environment was recorded, like the mouse movement, keyboard stroke, and also eye tracking data and their dialogues, and also the screen recording of their learning sessions. Okay, so the first result is, I guess many researchers are interested whether or not ChatGPT can really improve their performance. So in our study, we find compared to the first version of their essay, the second version of their essay, they improved their performance, and AI group significantly improved their essay score much higher than the other 3 groups, even outperformed the human expert group. That's the first result about the essay scores. So we also tested their knowledge gain by using this pre-post test. So we did the knowledge test twice, once before and once after the task. The analysis shows there are no significant differences between 4 groups. Same non-significancy were found in the transfer test. So in the transfer test, we did a 10 questions, quiz questions on the topic of AI in medical science. And also after the task, we measured their motivation levels. So we use this IMI instrument and we also found no significant differences between infer groups. For example, their interest level, like perceived competence, this pressure intentions. But the CN group, which is the control group, reported the lowest motivation level. And the checklist group reported slightly higher scores on these motivation dimensions compared to other groups. But what we really want to do is to analyze the learner's interaction process, not just consider learning as black box, right? We want to understand what happened during their interaction with AI, a human expert, or the checklist tool. So we used a kind of a technique called trace parser. This is what we developed during the Flora project. Basically, we adopted SIR models, for example, Maria Benet's coding protocol. We have processes such as orientation, planning, monitoring, evaluation, reading, rereading, and elaboration, organization. So what we did is we collect the multi-channel data, like their log data, their clickstream data, their mouse movement, keyboard stroke data, and then we use action library and process library to translate this raw data into self-regulation processes. For example, if a learner move their mouse to click on the timer, so a timer action will be logged. And based on the theoretical framework, check the timer is showing indicating students monitoring their time left or learning progress. So we will label that action from timer, click timer into monitoring. So it will be a self-regulation processes. Yeah. So on the website, we have listed a couple of papers on the trace parser. If you're interested, feel free to have a look. So this is the measurement result for the stage 1, which they have no different interventions, showing almost all the groups. There are no significant difference in terms of all different self-regulation processes, except checklist group has slightly lower orientation process compared to control group. But in the second stage, in the revision stage, we observed more elaboration and organization processes. Mainly, they were writing or revising their essay, and less reading activities in the AI and human expert group. And also, we noticed significant more evaluation process in the checklist group. And also more orientation processes in the AI, human expert, and checklist group compared to control group. So this other means learners were interacting with different facilitators. For example, AI group, the other means learners were interacting with ChatGPT. So HE groups means they were interacting with the human expert. So this result showing in these two groups, learners were like intensively interacting with ChatGPT or the human expert. Yeah, and also we conducted the process mining of the learning process and create 2 process maps, one for the AI group, one for the human expert group. Then we overlap this process map and compare which transitions are stronger in which group. So here, the red edges were the stronger transitions in AI group. So these numbers were transition probabilities, for example, from elaboration organization to ChatGPT interaction is 70% in AI group, but 43% in the human group, which here other changed to human expert. So one of the most important information this figure shows is in the AI group, learners will kind of stick to the interaction with ChatGPT. So they write something, they elaborate, they did the organization process, then they ask a question to ChatGPT. Once they receive or after they finish the interaction, they jump back to writing their essay. So this is one dominant process, a loop in the AI group. However, in the human expert group, we still observe a big amount of transitions between reading and writing. So teachers still trigger students, direct students back to read something, and also orientation and evaluation, which means the human expert group still triggers some students consider after evaluating their essay and go and read the instructional rubric page and then go back to evaluate their essay, and also planning to interaction with human expert, then go to orientation. So these are the process mining results. And basically the first sub-study tells us like these tools, such as ChatGPT, may not stimulate their motivation to learn or influence the levels of knowledge gain or knowledge transfer, but it can indeed rapidly improve short-term performance, especially in our task, their improvements in the essay score. But in the analysis of their processes, we do find relatively less interaction in the metacognition processes, such as evaluation, monitoring, orientation in the AI group, especially these metacognition processes are not interacting with like elaboration and interaction with ChatGPT. So this triggers some kind of concept we want to mention is metacognition laziness, and also the problem of over-reliance on AI. And so previous studies discussed the offloading of cognitive load, which can be beneficial. Students can find it easier to start a task with the help of AI, but it can also trigger the reliance on AI in our study. And we also discussed, so we wrote a paper titled as Be Aware of Metacognition Laziness. So in this paper, we discussed this kind of AI-empowered learning skills, showing it can indeed optimize the performance in the task, but whether or not it may optimize performance at the expense of developing human skills. So because this is a single task study, we can't test the situation is if we withdraw the scaffolding of ChatGPT. So we are planning a multitask study this year. So we want to test if students interact with ChatGPT, then we withdraw the ChatGPT and see what happened. So another important note is in our study, we find ChatGPT is particularly good at using a clear rubric, because in the prompts, we provide the rubric to ChatGPT. We also send the rubric to the human expert and checklist tools. So I think anything with a clear scoring rubric, ChatGPT is quite good at helping students or facilitating students. So another study is we want to really look into this box of other, right? So that's why we coded the screen recording of our study, and we used a model of help-seeking process model to kind of unpack this other box in a fine-grained detail. For example, we have help-seeking stages, diagnose question, ask help, evaluate help, or process help. So within ask help, we have different codes. For example, ask help instrumentally and ask more executive help. And we use the screen recording. So the screen recording included their mouse movement, click stream, and eye tracking data, and the dialogue data. So our finding was, as hypothesized in the theory, help-seeking was more linear process. So in the human expert group, it was indeed like that. So the students start their task, diagnose a question, ask a question, evaluate. Sometimes they ask a follow-up question, then they process their help. But in the ChatGPT group, AI group, we find sometimes students throw a question to ChatGPT without a clear diagnosing their problems. So for example, at the beginning of the task, students just ask ChatGPT to evaluate their essay. Yeah, and more importantly, we find in AI groups, students sometimes skip the evaluating of feedback from ChatGPT and directly process anything ChatGPT provides to the students, and then ask another question, then keep asking and process within this loop. So this is one finding. And in terms of the activities, we do find ChatGPT group, they ask more executive questions. They seek help in a very practical way, pragmatic way. And sometimes they don't show any response to ChatGPT's answers of their questions. However, in the human expert group, we do find more positive evaluation or feedback to the human teacher. So, and also the processing part, sometimes in the AI group, we do observed learners ignored ChatGPT's answer and just ask another question. But this rarely happens in the human expert group. Learners always respond to teachers' feedback and process their essay based on the feedback. And sometimes they return this pro-dory is they return to previous dialogues with the teacher. So that's the difference between AI group and human expert group. And also we further, now I have a video here showing the screen recording of a small session. So this learner asked a question to ChatGPT. And while ChatGPT is processing, usually took like 20 seconds, because we are not using ChatGPT, we're using the API. So we have 10 to 20 seconds delay of their answering. So while waiting the answers, these students, the student continued checking the reading page and think about what they should ask next. So here they closed, while waiting, they closed the ChatGPT 2, then read the other like instructions in our task. And at this time, this learner might realize he or she wanted to ask another question. Then this learner opened, and without reading the answer from the ChatGPT, he or she directly asked another question. And while sending this question, without reading the previous one, then go back to the reading material again and ask another question. So this is what we mean by sometimes students ignored the feedback. But when I say ignore, they are not completely not checking their answers. They were asking lots of questions in their mind one by one. But once they finished, this learner went back to the dialogue and read through the whole dialogue. Yeah, this is one example, might help you to understand the task. Click on how to move to the next page. Okay. So in our study, we also analyzed what questions they asked to ChatGPT and human expert. So in the human expert group, we find these blue edges. They ask lots of questions from an indirect request way or judgmental kind of questions. For example, could you please evaluate my essay, or could you please provide feedback on my essay? These are indirect or general questions, but for ChatGPT, they will ask very direct questions. For example, give me feedback on my essay, or please link these two sentences for me. And also in the ChatGPT group, they usually ask questions closely aligned to their knowledge gap. For example, how can I make my essay formal? This is about writing styles. So they ask instrumental questions. So seek information about steps or procedures in their writing. So in this kind of sub-study, we find learners do ask very pragmatic questions to ChatGPT, and these pragmatic questions and answers did significantly improve their performance. That's the biggest information here. And also, we interviewed students after the study. Many of them mentioned that one of the value they see in AI is they experience much lower social cost when asking a question to ChatGPT compared to asking a question to a human expert. So I think this social cost is something they consider when they interact with AI or human. And also, because we didn't give any other training about how to ask questions or their learning strategies or how to interact with AI or human, so students naturally showing adaptivity when facing different facilitators. So they ask different questions. And also we find previous models, for example, linear help-seeking process may face difficulty in explaining this human AI interaction because their interaction kind of are more complex and reducing loss of hypotheses. For example, learners kind of ignore AI's feedback. They don't have a pressure to provide feedback to ChatGPT's answer, right? And in our study, we have concerns. We do find concerns about learners' lack of evaluation and monitoring when they seek help from ChatGPT. So this triggers us thinking about how to better scaffold students' interaction with ChatGPT. For example, remind them to reflect or evaluate ChatGPT's answer. What is good, what is not useful, something like that. So we have 2 papers on this. Both we are drafting them and to be submitted pretty soon. But after looking into the behaviors and also their interactions, so we are also interested on who did learners really prefer to learn with. So we also measure their preference in our study. So we have a small scale, for example, ask students compared to AI, human tutor can better understand my essay and provide more helpful suggestions. Do you agree or not? So a 1 to 5 scale. And also we ask them to choose to prefer to work with a human expert or ChatGPT before and after the task. So before the task and after the task, we also calculated their preference change. So for example, 1 indicates like participants kind of shifting their preference from AI to human. 0 means that there were no changes, and the -1 means they more prefer human after the task. So this is our measurement, and in the pre-task measurement, we find no significant difference between groups. But in general, learners prefer to work or learn with the help of a human expert. So here you can see the score is almost around 0.9. That means around 90% they were kind of willing to work with a human. But after the task, the control group, the human expert group, and checklist group, they all showed a slightly improved preference on working with human expert, except the ChatGPT group. So only the ChatGPT group showed bigger preference to work with AI again in the task. So this is quite interesting. We find AI group who experienced ChatGPT, the more likely to work with AI again, and human group, 100% of them choose to work with a human expert again in the next task. And kind of interestingly is the checklist group. We also find students in checklist group tend to prefer human experts after the task, which they didn't experience ChatGPT or human expert in this task. And the difference, so the similarity between ChatGPT and the checklist group is we all feed the rubric to them. And the difference is the checklist group provides something like Grammarly to highlight their, for example, basic writing mistakes or academic writing mistakes or originalities or their level of writing, and provide some suggestions like suggestions how to correct their grammar mistakes or highlight the repeated sentences. And this is a checklist group. But learners do perform differently after the study. So what we find is this finding triggers us to think about the difference between ChatGPT or checklist. Checklist is, in my mind, a very typical technical AI-driven learning analytics tools or dashboard. So it's like Grammarly. And one of the main differences is the format. So the dialogic format in ChatGPT, I think, is naturally more attractive than the feedback tools. So students can interact with ChatGPT and maybe ask ChatGPT to elaborate or explain certain things. So instead of just getting feedback. Another thing is in the interviews, many students said they find the AI agent is very smart, but those in the checklist group, they still find the checklist tool has some kind of not making sense feedbacks. So the intelligence or the perceived intelligence of these tools or feedbacks influence their trust and aversion on algorithms or techniques. So which when I showed this result to our teacher, that a teacher we collaborated, so he was very happy, so we had a good discussion on this, and we think no matter how the data shows how practical AI can be, so teachers have always irreplaceable values. So students still prefer to learn with a human expert in general. So we have a paper to be submitted pretty soon, and maybe I hope it can be accepted. So in order to unpack this perceived value, so what the participants feel during the task, we did a follow-up interview with them. So we interviewed more than 50 participants in the AI and HE group after the task, and we targeted on what value they see from different facilitators. And there are three main ethical value dimensions, for example, empathy, care, and autonomy, which were most frequently mentioned in our interviews. For example, the student said, so even if my question was not clear enough, the teacher can still knew what I wanted to ask. This is from AI group. The context of saying this is this learner was saying something about ChatGPT didn't fully understand his or her question. So this is one value learners mention a lot. This is empathy, and also emotionally, like teachers can respond better to learners' intentions and emotions properly. Another dimension is care. So many students in the human expert group, they do feel this social pressure, and they worry about teachers being not patient to them. They worried about asking silly questions. So the student said, I hope the teacher will never get tired and judgmental about my questions. And another value is autonomy, were frequently mentioned. For example, here this learner said, I have greater power of selectivity and decision-making and greater freedom. What he or she meant was when they receive feedback from AI, they have the freedom to ignore it. But for the human expert group, they do have a pressure to think deeper how to process that feedback. So in general, we do find in the human expert group, more values mentioned about empathy in the human expert group. But in the AI group, the care value was mentioned much more than the HE group. And also we analyze the different values and try to structure it into these relationships of values, and we call them value tensions. So there are lots of different tensions, for example, internal tensions. So this value tension between empathy and autonomy. So some students said, okay, some students prefer very clear or very detailed feedback from the facilitators. But some students, they find, okay, if I need more very specific questions, sometimes I need to ask again and again to the teacher. Then I worry about the teachers being judgmental. So different values here were kind of conflict with each other, and also in external tensions. For example, the students mentioned, okay, this task is not that high stake. This is just an experiment. I voluntarily joined, but if I'm preparing for exam or interview, then I do want to interact with a human expert. At that time, I value more the development of my skills or the accuracy or the efficacy of my my learning. Then they are not worried too much about care, empathy, values. Okay. And also we notice that we have lots of other values from different stakeholders for example, developers, researchers, or teachers. So developers sometimes focusing on making AI very accurate. So try to avoid this hallucination problem. But sometimes learners' value is not about the AI being perfectly accurate. So there's a tension between different stakeholders, and that's why our study reminds me human AI, they have their own unique value, and learners, they do perceive and evaluate the affordance of different facilitators. And then the values are a very key ethical issue, which was not researched enough in previous studies. And different stakeholders, they should keep this value sensitive design in mind and keep the balance between different values. And for this study, we also have a paper on the review in BJET. So the last point, I want to go back to the checklist group, because the results showing the checklist group significantly triggered evaluation, which we were kind of surprised, but not 100% surprised, but we do pay attention to that. So we targeted on the one SR process called self-assessment. So we ask students to self-assess their performance after the stage 1 and stage 2. So we ask them to score their own performance. And we do a 5 minutes quick mini interview with participants, asking them, how do you think you performed? What you did good or feeling not good at, and what you're going to do in the future, something like that. We also ask the researchers to score their essays for the 2-version essays, and using the correlations between self-assessment score, their own scores, and the researcher score, which we consider as the right score, the standard. And we do find in the checklist group, checklist 2 significantly improved the accuracy of learners' self-assessment. So, but in the control group, while the longer they participate in the study, they showed inaccurate self-assessment of their own essay. They show a significant negative correlation with the researcher score, which means they kind of overestimated their performance a lot. Yeah. And also we interviewed them and we coded the factors they mentioned in their mini interview, what influenced their learning. And we use ENA to model to visualize the different factors they mentioned. And we find a very interesting figure in checklist group. And lots of these factors, the learners said influence their learning are related with platform function, which is the checklist 2. But in the control group, students were reflecting more into their own like writing skills, English levels, time management skills, and like learning strategies, something like that. Which is quite interesting. So I want to summarize our insights here. So I think checklist group, checklist tools also have their unique values, for example, facilitate evaluation or self-assessment. And adjusting their self-assessment is a very important part of self-regular learning and was under-researched in previous studies. And also the affordance of different tools is very important. For example, in our interview, many students mentioned the checklist tool, the Bloom's taxonomy part, particularly had a very low affordance. So they have their highlight of different sentences, but don't know how to make sense of this feedback. So they are not very useful for their learning. And also, no matter the affordance, learners kind of consider these tools and their dominant influence factor once you provided a tool, and less reflecting on their own abilities. Yeah, so this paper was just accepted like last weekend. So if you are interested, feel free to check maybe next week. Yeah. So I want to go back to the beginning of my talk. I mentioned I want to unpack the relationship between human and AI. So in Chinese, in Mandarin, we say 人和人工智能. So this and in Chinese is 和. And then since we are having an Olympic game again in this summer, which reminds me about the 2008. So at the opening ceremony, there was a unique performance. Thousands of actors performed 5 minutes almost only about this one character, He. So He has a very rich meaning in Chinese language. It can be a conjunction like and or with. It can also be a noun sound, like sum of some numbers, right? And it can also be a verb like mix, agree, follow, join. And it can also be adjective like gentle, like harmony. So this He in Chinese has a very rich connotations, and reminds me of reflecting the and or with this word in the relationship between AI and human. For example, I want to target on the learning and regulating with ChatGPT, but we can't simply consider using AI as a tutor to replace a human teacher, right? And in our study, we showed learners start to consider AI as a partner or a facilitator. So their learning were followed or joined or moderated by the ChatGPT tool. And also future learnings teaching may be a combination of human and AI. So in this study, we were randomized students into different groups, but in the real life, students have different agents, right? They have ChatGPT, they have their peers, they have a teacher to ask, they have their reading materials. So a real combination of these agents or facilitators are very interesting and promising in the future. And so I know in University of Oulu, Sana led a special issue about hybrid intelligence. So the intelligence is no longer a single stakeholder. Then we have learner AI or teacher AI or even learner teacher AI hybrid intelligence, hybrid regulation, which is very interesting and challenging also to unpack. In this year of luck, Mutlu did a wonderful keynote speech. So he discussed the interplay of human control and AI automation in the future education. I think this is also a very important topic. And Dragon proposed something similar, but definitely different concept, saying the human skills and AI-powered skills are equally important in future like learning and teaching. So we need to really develop scaffolding to facilitate and consider both high human and AI empowered skills. And eventually, I hope like different stakeholders, for example, learners, teachers, or researchers, developers, they can learn, work, and live in harmony with AI. And one of the future directions I think is very important is to construct this AI scaffold dialogue space. So for example, I'm now working on a medical project. We are using ChatGPT to play as a patient, the medical students to do as a doctor. They have a dialogue, so they enter this kind of a dialogical space. But we can also send their dialogue to a more senior experienced character, which also played by ChatGPT. So then this character can provide feedback to the students as metacognition scaffoldings. So this is what we mean by AI, what I mean by AI scaffold dialogue space. And also the last page is a small job advertisement. So we are hiring 2 postdocs. If you are interested, please email me. And thank you all for listening. And thank you, SoLAR, again, for granting me this project. This is really helpful. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for a very interesting presentation. It seems like you're doing many different things related.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're definitely happy that we invited you, and we have you have the space now to present all of these things. We have quite some questions in the chat already, and I think I would give the first question to Ellen. Ellen, would you like to ask your question yourself? If yes, just unmute your microphone.
Yeah.
We don't hear you.
Shall I stop sharing my screen?
Sure. Yes, now we can hear you.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm also a very big fan of the work that you do in self-regulated and all of this stuff. I have a lot of questions. I'll maybe just have one for now. I would like maybe to know much more about whether you checked about the ChatGPT, if it has domain knowledge specific.
Yeah.
It could be like hallucinating on the answers regarding to this domain for the explanations, not the summary part, but the explanations part.
Yeah. We do write a very long prompt to ChatGPT. So we provide the task instruction, the rubric, and also the reading materials, and also some limitations. For example, you can't write the essay for the students, something like that. So the prompt was very informative. And the teachers received the same material. So the teachers had the instruction page, the rubric, and also the reading materials. Yeah.
But my question is a bit slightly different, because in an educational setting, many times the chat has a general knowledge, but not, let's say, the specific vocabulary and the specific targeted knowledge. So have you checked maybe with this part whether it was hallucinating? Because it definitely generates an answer, but that doesn't mean that it's relevant or useful.
Yeah. So we did code their questions and answers, and in our expression, in our judgment, I think ChatGPT did really good on answering these questions. There are no almost maybe on less than 1% of the feedback are not making much sense. So otherwise, all the feedbacks are very useful. So our students also confirm this. Yeah.
Okay,
thank you.
If there is time, I will also ask my rest of the questions, but later.
Cool.
Great, thank you. Then we have an immediate follow-up question from Manuel.
Yeah.
And afterwards, we will go to Bilkis, just so you're prepared.
Hi, thank you for the presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up a little bit with, you already mentioned that they had all the context in the prompt, but was it also managing the conversation in memory, or every message was a new one?
We also sending their previous conversation to ChatGPT whenever students ask a question. So they just ask a question, so we are sending like 5,000, like 3,000 words to ChatGPT. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Bilkis and then Trish.
Hi, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. I found it quite interesting because back in 2021, I did my MSc in Artificial Intelligence and Data Science, having been an academic writing skills tutor. And I did my research on conversational AI to support academic writing process. That was just before ChatGPT came out, and I had to go through the process of being someone that is not so confident with programming and coding. I had to design a prototype and then get students to interact with it, and then I went through all that stress, and then ChatGPT came. So, but I'm fortunate to be doing my PhD right now, and I'm still looking at the use of conversational chatbots or AI to support students' academic writing processes. So right now I'm looking at automated feedback systems to give formative feedback to students' writing. And one of the things that I found, which is the basis for my question, where I asked that, what access do students have? Because one of the things that I found is students need to have unlimited access, because if we're arguing for flexibility, then if I look at myself as a student, sometimes, because I've got kids, sometimes I want to do my writing in the middle of the night. So did your students have unlimited access to that system? That's my first question. And then I saw that you developed a platform called Flora. I don't know if that's the right pronunciation.
Yeah, Flora.
Would you think that maybe a system that is already in existence would be better for students to, as a platform for students to interact with ChatGPT, as opposed to going into another separate systems coupled with all other systems that they have to use for their teaching and learning? So what do you think about these two things?
Yeah, so thank you for these two brilliant questions. The first one is, in our this experiment study, these students have limited time. So they have a fixed amount of time, 2 hours and write, and then 1 hour revision. But we also did a follow-up study in a real setting. So a real classroom, we give unlimited time to students. In general, they spent like 2 hours in in a task. But like you said, some students, once they have no time limit, they start to ask lots of other questions, maybe unrelated to the task. Yeah, so that's one thing teachers need to consider when they give unlimited access to the students. Yeah, but in our study, it's a well-controlled setting. Yeah, the second question is a very good one, because in the FLORA project, Maria Dragan and Inga, they led that project. The follow-up development is we are trying to delink our tools from that model, because everything is based on model. Then we want to delink this and make it into a plugin, so FLORA tools can be used in any website. And Dr. Xinyu Li is working on this. I think this tool should be able kind of to test maybe next year. Then it will be able to be embedded into lots of other already existing learning platforms or writing tools. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you very much for that. Would you be okay with me reaching out to you regards to access to FLORA?
Yeah, definitely. No worries.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Trish, we have a question from Trish and then another question from Ellen. But I wonder if Trish is around here. Doesn't seem so. So she asked a question about the student profiles. I assume if you can tell us a bit about.
Like, I think half of students are undergraduate students at Peking University, half are graduate students. So in our university, students are pretty good at exams, and they are top students in China. So their English and learning skills are quite good. But we do find the task is still a bit challenging for many students, because this is reading and writing English, and this is very time limited. Yeah. I'm not sure if I understand. Just qualified candidate for the study. What is that? Actually,
I also assume it would be about the profile of the students that participated in the study.
Okay. Yeah. So, but they are coming from different backgrounds. So very diverse. Yeah.
Right. Back to Ellen. And then I also have a question, if we still have the time.
Great. Thank you again. So you showed how the system was working with the ChatGPT, that the students needed to open it on the side panel and so on. I would like to ask, first of all, whether they were instructed that they can use it, for example, unlimited times, or when it's better for them to use it, because you saw that there was also like this loop that they were keeping asking. And also, how was the case with the experts as well?
Yeah. So in there, they all have only 1 hour to interact. But in the ChatGPT group, we find students ask very pragmatic questions. So, they have in average 7 rounds of questions, like in average 7 questions. But in the human expert group, they have more interaction, because sometimes human to human interaction, they are pretty short. They are not a big chunk of information provided like from ChatGPT. So I think that's one of the main difference. And sometimes the teacher might give some feedback, and after 10 seconds, the teacher follow up another feedback, like showed another example of how to revise it, something like that. Yeah.
So basically, the expert was with the student nearby, let's say, in a collaborative setting.
It's one-on-one, a real-time interaction, okay. But not in the physical same room. So they are online. It's like a real-time one-on-one online tutor, and teacher can access their essay in real time. So whenever the students change, the teacher knows.
Then one shorter question in this, if I may. So have you, maybe as a combination of like the question I have also in the chat and now what you're saying, I would assume that the expert did not take, let's say, a few seconds to reply. Maybe he was replying faster than the ChatGPT was taking to generate the answer. Have you maybe considered that all of these cases where the student just keeps asking, maybe asks questions also that would be less difficulty, and probably would not communicate with an expert, but could be potential points for having a knowledge enhancement start let's say, or part, like the retrieval augmented generation, for example, that now it's very popular with LLMs?
Yeah, this is a brilliant question. Yeah, for the first round of dialogue, teacher usually are slower than ChatGPT because teacher needs to read through the whole essay. So even though we give the teachers essay before once they finish the first stage, we send the essay to teacher. So from the teacher's end, but the teacher always needs some time to read through. Once they read through that, teacher responds slightly faster than ChatGPT. So ChatGPT usually takes 10 to 20 seconds, but teacher maybe responds, and then also teacher tend not to create a big chunk of information. They just write something, then send, then write something to send. Then students feel this interaction is more in real time. Yeah. Yeah, the second question is, yeah, it's also very interesting. I don't know how the teacher sometimes send back that question to students. So students sometimes ask, can you give me an example of AI in education? Then the teacher, if students keeps asking this question, very pragmatic question, then the teacher might say, oh, this is something you need to think about in this task. So that's why we find teachers kind of push back questions. Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, that would also be a nice feature of ChatGPT or any LLM that would also scaffold away. So not always give the answer, but also ask the right questions back to the students.
Yeah.
Great. I think our time is up.
I think in LAC this year in the Khan Academy keynote was saying exactly this, that they are trying to implement the LLM and they try to refuse to give an answer right away. So I think there are some people trying to do that already.
Yeah, great.
Okay, we're already 1 minute after 5, so I guess my question, I will have to ask it whenever we meet next time. Iju, thank you very much for joining us. Everybody, thank you very much for being here. I will just post in the chat. Here's where you will be able to find the recordings. And if you are interested in any other SoLAR news and the future webinars that we will organize, follow us on social media and subscribe to our newsletter. Thank you everyone for being here, and thank you, Iju, for the time and the effort.
Thank you, Aina. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Bye-bye. Thank you.